entire Gospel of John. And so what is going on here, though, is that this story comes at the end, or at least very near the end, of a very popular Jewish festival known as the Feast of Tabernacles. And during that feast, it was a week-long celebration. They would, in the temple courts, specifically the courts of women, they had these 4 different stands, each containing 4 different bowls. And they would use the worn-out garments from the priests as wicks of a candle and start these like bonfires, basically, right there in the temple. And the rabbis from that period said that the temple was burning so brightly that the light would reflect off of the yellow limestone walls of the city of Jerusalem, and the entire city was just lit with this festive celebration. The streets would be lined with dancers who would be twirling around with torches. They would have choirs. They would have singers who would be going out and just declaring the wonder of what's going on here during the Feast of Tabernacles. And the irony of it all is that this man, blind from birth, is there during this time of celebration, and the celebration is as invisible to him as he is to those who are there celebrating. Like he can see and witness none of the joy, none of the celebration, none of the festivities, none of the happiness that's going on around him. And what we have to see, what we have to understand is that this story comes as the exclamation point of Jesus' longer interaction with the Jewish people during the Feast of Tabernacles. So if you flip back briefly to John chapter 7, we see in John chapter 7, it talks about the Feast of Tabernacles being near. And as I said, the Feast of Tabernacles was this huge, huge time of bright light and singing and festive celebration. And initially, Jesus was on the fence about whether or not he would even attend, because his reputation at this point was not just controversial, but confrontational. And there was a danger that if he showed up and made his presence known, that the Jewish leaders would have him executed for blasphemy. So at this point, roughly 6 months have passed since the feeding in the wilderness, the feeding of the 6,000 or the 5,000. And his popularity and his reputation have kind of gotten a little bit wonky, because now there are people who are believers. There are those also who are openly hostile to the message that he sends. But here's what we have to understand about first century Jewish culture. Because the temple had for a very long time been the absolute center of Jewish civic and ceremonial life. The Jews would have believed that God could be experienced anywhere in the world, but he was most directly experienced there in the temple courts, the most holy of holies. So the temple was the major center of Jewish civic and ceremonial life. They believed very strongly in praying in and toward the temple. They would direct their prayers in the direction of the temple, not terribly unlike the way that modern-day Muslims face Mecca during their prayers. When Jonah was lost at sea, he was talking about offering prayers in God's holy temple. The temple had a huge significance on Jewish spirituality and the way they conducted life in general. The problem they were facing during the first century is that this was no longer Solomon's temple from its origins. It was no longer even Ezra's temple when it was rebuilt. This was Herod's temple. This was a temple that was being reconstructed and remodeled by one of the local Roman kings. Herod had a horrible reputation for being this cruel tyrant. And so the Jews during that period were starting to wonder if maybe God hadn't really come through for them by sustaining their temple, and that this was one more thing snatched away as they lived under a current state of exile under Rome. By the time the temple was eventually destroyed in 70 AD, the rabbis were already teaching that God had abandoned the Jewish people long before the temple ever fell down. So that's the paradox I want you to understand. That's the paradox we have to see here. On the one hand, they were out there celebrating in the streets and singing these festive songs, but they were also not really all that, like, all in for their own religious observances. Like, they didn't have the same confidence in organized religion that they once did. The parallel I'm seeking to draw here is not that terribly unlike the culture of our own day, where we see a lot of religious festivity, but we have a very waning confidence in organized religion and the church, in the traditional church and traditional Christianity. In fact, in the last 10 years or more, we've seen a sharp rise in those who would say, if you ask them what religion you are, they would say, I am unaffiliated. I have no religion. I am. They call them the nuns, N-O-N-E-S. Those who say, I'm not really affiliated with any particular religion. And we have those who kind of have their hands off and say, listen, I've seen the mess of organized corporate Christianity with all its celebrity pastors and sexual scandals and everything in between. I'm not sure where I fit in with that. And there's a lot of folks out there who are in the process of what they call deconstructing, meaning they are walking away from traditional faith. They may still have a cursory belief in God, but they are just fed up with organized institutional Christianity as it stands. I'm not raising this issue by way of scolding anyone. I'm saying I actually get it. And I think that Jesus does too. I think that Jesus would understand and say, listen, there's a lot of mess when we have people trying to lead people to God. And this is the kind of mess that springs up. And so if you are here, if you're listening at home, if you're wherever and you're not really sure where you are with God, I believe that Jesus can speak to you in that mess. And I'm telling you, as someone who has been in that mess, I get it. I get that there is some harshness that can come from being a part of church culture for any length of time. In fact, I don't know anyone personally who has been around Christians for very long who does not have some horror story of just judgmental or just some scandal or whatever it may be, maybe even some kind of abuse in that past. And there is a lot of reason why there is just that sense of, really? But we still have that culture that longs for religious observance and longs for religious belief. Every Christmas time, right, we have the celebrities who would never darken the door of a church, who are nonetheless on the radio singing Christmas carols about the virgin birth and mild he lay his glory by, born that man no more may die. We have that vocabulary still in our culture. We have all of our spiritual reflexes intact. But we're not really ready to embrace Jesus fully as we once did. And in that culture, in our culture today, it's become actually really, really weird if you are still a religious observer. So you can go to some parts of the U.S. where it's almost kind of dangerous to be a Christian believer. Let me say it this way. A generation or more ago, like in the 1950s, if you were not a regular attender of a local church, people might find you a bit odd or eccentric. They might even think that maybe there's something wrong, that you're not part of a church community. Now, it's the opposite. If you are all in with religion and all in with Jesus, people might look at you a little bit like, are you trying to push our culture in the wrong direction? Are you trying to push our culture back to a different time? Are you trying to push your own morals on our own culture? If you are a Christian in the world today, you are regarded not just as merely a little bit odd, but now you are the one who is eccentric and potentially dangerous. But my application here comes from a secular novel by Julian Barnes. And Barnes tells the story about what it's like to be an atheist among casual Christians. And Barnes is at a dinner party where he hears these believers talking in the background about their faith, and they're having a very casual kind of conversation that he can't quite wrap his head around. Because he says if you want to be a Christian, go all in and not just cultural Christianity. He says this. He says that he sees little point in a religion which is merely a social event, as opposed to one which tells you exactly how to live, which colors and stains everything. By stains, of course, he doesn't mean that negatively. He means something that will actually influence everything about the way you live. And that's kind of where I'm coming from this morning. I think Jesus is saying the exact same thing to his culture and our culture today. There is no value in a religion or a spirituality that only sees ceremonial observance and does not color and stain everything in our lives and orient us towards true human flourishing. That's where we're going to be headed to this morning. And I want to see that Jesus speaks to his culture and our culture and says three distinct things, that the true light offers three distinct things that I believe have to be in alignment for culture to truly flourish. The first is ultimate hope. Ultimate hope. And to understand this better, we have to understand a little bit more about the background of the Feast of Tabernacles itself. Because the feast was happening every fall, and during the fall, in a very agrarian society, there would be two things happening. First, you would have drought, so a drier climate, and you'd have shorter days. Shorter days meaning you'd have more long periods of darkness. And so during that time, the festival was oriented toward looking for the promised day of the Messiah, during which time they would have light even in the evening, and that water would flow from Jerusalem down Main Street. That was their hope. So the festival had all these different interwoven themes of harvest, winter darkness, and the hope of future prosperity, all kind of baked in and wrapped together. So they were hoping and looking for a Messiah that would bring water and light. Listen to what it says in John chapter 7. John chapter 7, jump down to verse 37. On the last day of the feast, the great day, Jesus stood up and cried out, "If anyone thirsts, let him come to me and drink. Whoever believes in me, as the scripture has said, out of his heart will flow rivers of living water." Now this he said about the Spirit, whom those who believed in him were to receive, for as yet the Spirit had not been given, because Jesus was not yet glorified. Verse 40, when they heard these words, some of the people said, "This really is the prophet." Others said, "This is the Christ." But some said, "Is the Christ to come from Galilee? Has not the scripture said that Christ comes from the offspring of David and comes from Bethlehem, the village where David was?" So there was a division among the people over him. Some of them wanted to arrest him, but no one laid hands on him. All right, now flip over one page to look at John chapter 8 and verse 12. Same overall dialogue. Again, Jesus spoke to them saying, "I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will not walk in darkness, but will have the light of life." So we see that there's some division about who Jesus is. Even the Jews are kind of debating among themselves about whether they should crown him as king or arrest him. But that conversation is bookended by these two promises of water and life. The two hopes that they had for all of human society are found not just in the feast, but in Jesus Christ himself. That he is the source of living water, the Spirit, and that he would be the light that illumines and gives radiance and power and life to everything in the entire world. Not just for the temple, not just for Jerusalem, but for all the nations, all the peoples, for all time. And if you remember your Bible history, if you even saw the old Charlton Heston movie about the Exodus, you know that God in the wilderness, when he was leading his people to freedom from Egypt, he gave them a pillar of fire to guide them, and he gave them water from a rock, light and water all over again. If you've ever worked a garden, what do your plants need? They need water and they need light. They need those things to thrive and flourish. Every human society needs those elements to thrive and flourish. You take God away, you remove God from society, what is left? Slow societal death. The reason why we are at each other's throats politically in today's day and age is because we have lost a common view of what really is our ultimate hope. And the thing of it is that if we don't have God as our ultimate hope, something else will take his place. Over and over again, we see this. One political theorist uses the phrase, the law of conservation of religion. I love that phrase. And what he means is there's a finite amount of religious conviction and fervor in America. And if you remove that conviction from the church, it has to go somewhere. Like it has to go somewhere else. And for our America today, it flows right into the world of politics. And we are seeing politics again and again having not just a place where we debate ideas, but rather it's a place where we see our religious convictions writ large. If you are, well, I'm going to read to you from an article from The Atlantic here recently. He said, the writer says that politics have to fill the vacuum where religion once was. On the left, the woke, he's not using this pejoratively, he just means the woke take religious notions such as original sin, atonement, ritual, and excommunication and repurpose them for secular ends. Whereas religion sees the promised land as being above in God's kingdom, the utopian left sees it as being ahead in the realization of a just society here on earth. On the right, adherents find solace in conspiracy cults that tell a religious story of earthly corruption redeemed by a godlike force. We are, I mean, the reason, if you don't believe me, just go to any school board meeting in America right now, and you will see this religious jihad played out before your eyes with parents and school board leaders. We are in the middle of this weird moral convulsion here in America, because without religion, without anything to guide us as an ultimate true hope, we are left with earthly ideas about what makes a free or just society. And the problem with that is that those ideas, no matter how lofty or how well-intended, do not by themselves solve or heal the wounds that you and I are living with. Helen Fisher, who was an expert on the modern social justice movement, she says that if we want, she means this positively, by the way. She's an advocate for social justice. And she says, if we want people to genuinely own their mistakes, then you will have to offer the possibility of redemption. What we have now with social justice movements is a range of sins, but we don't yet have a good idea what the mechanism is for confessing, repenting, and being resolved. That's huge. That's enormous. And listen, if you're skeptical about Christianity, or if you have friends who are skeptical about Christianity, at the very least, Jesus Christ and the gospel offer that mechanism for true redemption and true lasting social justice forevermore. As the true light, he illumines our sin, he exposes our inner darkness, but he also illumines the path for redemption, for freedom, and the path back to God. He is our ultimate hope. Second, the second thing is that Jesus Christ gives us genuine freedom. This is John chapter, genuine freedom. Genuine freedom. This is John chapter 8. Jump down with me to verse 31. By the way, the whole time he's engaging this dialogue, the Jews are going this back and forth kind of conversation. It has all the earmarks of a trial or a legal proceeding where Jesus is the defendant trying to defend his reputation amongst all these different Jewish accusers. So in John chapter 8, verse 31, Jesus says, if you abide in my word, you are truly my disciples, and you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. They answered him, we are offspring of Abraham and have never been enslaved to anyone. How is it that you say you will become free? Jesus answered them, truly, truly, I say to you, everyone who commits sin is a slave to sin. The slave does not remain in the house forever. The son remains forever. So if the son sets you free, you will be free indeed. I know that you are offspring of Abraham, yet you seek to kill me because my word finds no place in you. I speak of what I have seen with my father, and you do what you have heard from your father. So in America today, freedom is one of our most deeply held virtues, and for good reason. But there's a lot of confusion about what freedom fundamentally means. In a landmark case of Planned Parenthood versus Casey, the Supreme Court said that freedom, at the heart of liberty, is the freedom to define one's own concept of existence, meaning of the universe, and the mystery of life. To define your own concept, basically to chart your own course and to serve your own path. The problem with this kind of thinking is that it sounds superficially liberating, but it's deeply flawed. Because if you base all of your decisions based on your own intellect or your own wishes or your own path, it is a recipe for chaos. I don't know if you guys are a fan of Stephen Colbert. He's a late night host who took over for Letterman. He used to have a show called The Colbert Report, which is like a satire of a lot of political talking head talk shows. And he introduced the word truthiness on his show. Truthiness. He said, I'm sure some of the word police, the wordnistas over at Webster's are going to say, that's not a word. Well, anyone who knows me knows I'm no fan of dictionaries or reference books. They're elitist. Who's Britannica to tell me the Panama Canal was finished in 1914? If I want to say it happened in 1941, that's my right. I don't trust books. They're all fact, no heart, because that's where the truth comes from, ladies and gentlemen, the gut. Sarcasm aside, Colbert is hitting on a very important point, namely that, again, we are looking for truth in our own ideas, in our own intellect, in our own gut feelings. And the reason he's making this a satire point is because he recognizes that this truly is a recipe for social chaos. A helpful way to look at this is through a lens. So the philosopher Isaiah Berlin says there are two different kinds of freedom. The one kind of freedom is freedom from. It's freedom from restrictions, freedom from your parents, freedom from traditional religion. And that's the kind of freedom that kind of births movements like truthiness or the post-truth era or whatever else it may be. It's the freedom from restrictions, the freedom from all semblance of personal responsibility. But there's another kind of freedom, and the second kind of freedom is freedom for. Freedom for. It's the freedom to live out your commitments to your institutions, live out your commitment as a husband, wife, mother, father, brother, whatever it may be. It's the freedom for committing to those things and committing to civic and personal virtue. We can't have freedom from without also having freedom for. So here in this passage, Jesus is primarily accenting the need for freedom for. It's not just freedom from all restriction, it's freedom for the truth. That's how the truth sets us free. We will never be truly free until we are committed to the truth. Freedom for that particular strand of what's going on. The Jews were not willing to hear this. They still believe that their freedom came from their descendant, their ancestry, looking back to Abraham. They believed that because they were ethnically Jewish, that they had all the answers. But Jesus says again and again and again, no. You can't claim to be free from sin if you're still trying to kill me. Like it seems obvious to us, but he had to keep making this point. Listen, if you are going to be my adversaries, you can't claim to be descendants of Abraham. That's why Paul will later in his letter to the Romans say there are some who are ethnically descendants of Israel, and there are some who are spiritual descendants of Israel. Not everyone who was born of Abraham is now an heir to that promise. Now, that might give us a lens to look at what's going on here in the world today, look at what's going on overseas. It's certainly true that there is conflict going on in Israel today. We see this same pattern kind of playing out. And listen, let's be cynical for a moment, okay? Because there was just a landmark study released from Pew Research that outlined the beliefs and self-understanding of modern-day Israelites. And the overwhelming majority of them don't see the land that they're inhabiting as being connected to the Old Testament promises at all. They don't, the majority of them, not all of them, but the majority of them do not believe that the land that they're inhabiting was truly the gift of God. And that partly means that these are people who are just as rebellious today as the Jews in the first century world. There's a reason why Jesus said that Israel's house would be a desolation until the day when he chooses to bless Israel, not because of their virtue, not because of anything that they have uniquely done, but because of his promise, his original promise to their ancestor Abraham. And there will be a day when he will gather those people, and there will be belief exploding in the nation of Israel like we've never seen it before. And that's at least partly why there is warrant for continuing to support the nation of Israel. I know many, many people, including many good Christians that I personally know, who struggle with seeing some of the images that we see on the news today. I 100% get that. It's hard to understand how to sort out our support for God's people and the modern nation state of Israel. We don't always have to support everything that we see the modern nation state of Israel doing. However, we recognize that God has given this eternal promise, and that because he will bring that to fruition and fulfillment, we continue to pray for the blessing of Israel, particularly that they would come to know Jesus in a full, expansive way, and that she would finally live out her purpose as being a blessing to God and a blessing to surrounding nations. God continues to have a plan for his people, and Jesus' words here may sound harsh, but we recognize that this is part of a larger story where he will bless his people, not because of anything that anyone here on earth has ever done, but because of his eternal promises and his grace to his people, then and now. That's what true freedom becomes. That's what true freedom is, for us to recognize virtue and to recognize grace and to commit our lives to freedom for living out God's truth. The third thing that the true light brings is absolute truth. Absolute truth. The conversation by this point with Jesus and the Jews is it's reaching a fevered pitch. So if we jump down to chapter 8, verse 52, the Jews said to him, "Now we know that you have a demon. Abraham died, as did the prophets, yet you say, if anyone keeps my word, he will never taste death. Are you greater than our father Abraham, who died? And the prophets died. Who do you make yourself out to be?" Jesus answered, "If I glorify myself, my glory is nothing. It's my Father who glorifies me, of whom you say he is our God." So he's basically saying, listen, the God you worship, he's the God saying, this is my son. I'm glorifying my son. Verse 55, "But you have not known him. I know him. If I were to say that I do not know him, I would be a liar like you. But I do know him, and I keep his word. Your father Abraham rejoiced that he would see my day. He saw it and was glad." So the Jews said to him, "You are not 50 years old, and have you seen Abraham?" Jesus said to them, "Truly, truly, I say to you, before Abraham was, I am." So they picked up stones to throw at him, but Jesus hid himself and went out of the temple. Now, we've already seen Jesus make a few different I am statements. I am the bread of life. I am the light of the world. Here he makes a statement with no qualifier whatsoever. It's just, before Abraham, I am. And if you were a good Jewish reader or a good Jewish listener, you would immediately recognize the words I am and associate them with the name of God himself, Yahweh, in the Old Testament. God calls himself I am. That's what he reveals himself to Moses as. They recognize this was the very name of God. So when Jesus emphatically says, before Abraham was, I am, it's a simple but bold and provocative declaration that I am God standing right here in your midst. It's no wonder that they thought this was blasphemous in their eyes. He either is God or he's lying, and if he's lying, he's worthy of execution right there on the spot. That was the fury that it arose with them. And in today's world, if you try to make any kind of absolute claim to religious truth, you too will experience hostility from those around you. Because after all, aren't all religions the same? Don't they all? I mean, they might differ from some superficial reality, sure, but don't they all teach some deeper moral love and goodness? And the answer is not really. I mean, they may superficially do so, but here's how I always phrase it. Every religion has different perspectives on how we were created, how we're meant to live, and how salvation is meant to be achieved. Those are big questions. And if I want to say, listen, they're all basically the same, that's fine, but I can't respect, or I can't claim to respect my Muslim neighbor if I say the things that make your religion distinct don't really matter to me. Those things matter to these different cultures. And if we can say many, many things, but we can't possibly say that all religions are basically the same, because they are radically, radically different. Jesus, again and again and again, declares himself to be God in the flesh. If you want any proof that Christianity is true and other religions are not true, you look to the person of Jesus. Because Jesus stands right there and says, if you want to find God, right here, before Abraham, I am. He is the eternal Son of God. And if you want to experience true spirituality, true life, you will experience that only by coming to Jesus Christ himself. He is the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to God except through him. That's the exclusive claim of Christianity. The beautiful thing about Christianity is that it's radically inclusive, because it's all about grace. It's not about following the rules and you'll get in. It's about Jesus Christ dying on the cross and experiencing his grace and his forgiveness, and that's what leads us home. That's what leads us back to the Father. So the whole conversation at this point, the whole Feast of Tabernacles, concludes with Jesus narrowly escaping execution. But then we pivot. And we pivot from Jesus declaring himself to the light of the world to the culture that rejects him, or at least is divided about him. And now he's the light of the world, not just culturally, but personally. Personally to this man born blind. If we come back to John chapter 9, we're now ready to unpack what's going on with this man born blind. And notice from the very beginning that the culture and the disciples are unable to really wrap their heads around why he's been in this condition. They immediately assume it must be because of some sin in his life. And listen, we all want to make sense of human suffering. We all look for reasons why things are the way they are. Why do bad things happen to good people? And there's not always a good, clear answer. And if you don't have religious convictions to fall back on, you might conclude that life is ultimately random. It's all about random natural forces. It's just the product of chance and necessity. If you're a religious person, you might look at this through the lens of karma, like the disciples. Maybe it's some sin in your life. Maybe that's why you're having cancer or a hangnail or whatever else it may be. But Jesus says, no. The man is in his condition so that the works of God might be displayed in him. By the way, it doesn't say the work of God. The works of God might be displayed in him. Jesus is already predicting, he already knows, rather, that the miracle he's going to perform is more than just healing this man. Look at verse 6. Having said these things, he spat on the ground and made mud with the saliva. Then he anointed the man's eyes with the mud and said to him, "Go wash in the pool of Siloam," which means sent. So he went and washed and came back seeing. This is gross. There's no way to kind of, get around this. Jesus has the power of God. He could snap his fingers or, bat an eyelash and it would just fix the man immediately. Instead, he uses dirt from the city street and his own spit. That's That's gross. Like, he makes this mixture, smears it on this guy's eyes. He's got to like go hobble with his cane or whatever he has to go to the pool and wash off. People are probably like seeing him walk past with this, smud smeared on his face. What is Jesus doing exactly? It's a reenactment in some ways of the story of Eden. Because in Eden, God takes the dust of the earth to create a new man. Here, Jesus takes the mud to give a man his sight and, as we'll see, make a new man out of him. Literally make a new man out of him. And what happens, again, I'm glossing over some of our text this morning. I'm just summarizing for you. What happens is that his neighbors and people who know him best are seeing him walk around seeing now at this point. And they're like, they can't figure out, like, this can't be the same guy. It's not the same guy, right? And the Jewish leaders, of course, they were fine with him being blind, but now that he's healed, that kind of upsets the apple cart in terms of their own, worldview. They'd rather he be blind than have him be healed on the Sabbath, especially by a troublemaker named Jesus. And so what happens is that they interrogate him. They want to know what happened. And of course, the man who has been healed doesn't really know much of anything. He knows his name was Jesus and that he healed him. But the Jewish leaders are insisting, no. If he healed you on the Sabbath, he must be some kind of sinner. And so they bring him in for questioning. They don't get the answers they want. They bring his parents in for questioning. That's embarrassing, right? And when his parents don't give him the answers they want either, they bring him again for questioning, and they just interrogate this man. And what follows is an absolutely beautiful, it's a master class of how to share our faith in a hostile and unbelieving world. Here's what the man says. In verse 25, jump down to verse 25. He says, whether he, meaning Jesus, whether Jesus is a sinner, I do not know. One thing I do know, that though I was blind, now I see. It's the very famous verse. It was the inspiration for the song Amazing Grace. They keep pressing him. What did he do to you? How did he open your eyes? He answered them, I've told you already, and you would not listen. Why do you want to hear it again? Do you also want to become his disciples? And they reviled him, saying, you are his disciple, but we are disciples of Moses. We know that God has spoken to Moses, but as for this man, we do not know where he comes from. The man answered, why? This is an amazing thing. You do not know where he comes from, and yet he opened my eyes. We don't know that God does not listen to sinners, but if anyone is a worshiper of God and does his will, God listens to him. Never since the world began has it been heard that anyone opened the eyes of a man born blind. If this man were not from God, he could do nothing. It's a beautiful, beautiful testimony because he doesn't engage them on their terms. Instead of trying to get into the mud, no pun intended, of their own arguments, he just tells a story. Again and again and again. He tells the story of how his own life has now been changed. There is a lesson here, by the way, that changed lives often come before changed minds. Changed lives often come before changed minds. And that this man had a life that had been changed, but that testimony and that experience wasn't quite getting through to the obstinate, stuck in the mud, religious leaders of Jesus' day. They throw him out. They throw him out. And it would have been a good way of identifying with all the Christians who are reading John's biography for the very first time and realizing that, hey, we too, because of our faith in Jesus, have been excluded from the synagogues and traditional places of worship. And that this man is experiencing the exact same things that we're going through. And by the way, after Jesus tells him to go to the pool and wash his eyes off and be healed, we don't see Jesus appear again. This man is on his own until Jesus reappears in verse 35. Verse 35, Jesus heard that they had cast him out, and having found him, he said, do you believe in the Son of Man? He answered, who is he, sir, that I may believe in him? Jesus said to him, you have seen him, and it is he who is speaking to you. He said, Lord, I believe, and he worshiped him. There is a beauty to that experience. Because listen, it's easy to get discouraged by all the doom and gloom stories about what's going on in our world today and all the disbelief that we're experiencing in our world today. And you start to wonder and want to pull your hair out and say, well, can there be anything good coming out of all of this mess? And the answer sometimes is just that one person at a time who comes with a changed life and a changed mind and a changed heart, who says, Lord, I believe. That maybe there isn't a real answer for some major societal, huge, sweeping change, as much as we might long for that. But sometimes it's about seeing that one changed life, one person at a time, and seeing the way the gospel takes root in their lives, and seeing their eyes open for the very first time, and see the truth, the light, and to experience a God who leads his children home. And then in this passage, Jesus does something extraordinary. Verse 39, don't miss how crazy this is, because up until now, Jesus has been on trial. Now Jesus says, for judgment I came into this world, that those who do not see may see, and those who see may become blind. Some of the Pharisees near him heard these things and said to him, are we also blind? Jesus said to them, if you were blind, you would have no guilt, but now that you say we see, your guilt remains. Jesus says, listen, you put me on trial. I'm the one who's really the judge of you. I'm the one who has the Father's authority to judge what's true, what's false, who's in, who's out, who's blind, and who can really see. The irony of all this is that the one who has just been healed is the one who really can see, and all the Pharisees, all the religious experts of his day are the ones now who are truly spiritually blind. They're missing out on the Savior standing among them and the miracle that he has performed in restoring this man to sight. But the beauty of it is that as the light of the world, God is illumining the darkness of our own culture's disbelief and discontent, and he is leading and guiding every single one of us back to him. In the postmodern novel, Life After God, Douglas Copeland talks about these characters who are trying to wrestle with a world where there's no more religion. And when you get to the end of this novel, the main character, their narrator the whole time, starts getting kind of wistful and pensive and reflective about what his life has been like. He says, I think the price we paid for our golden life was an inability to fully believe in love. We have religious impulses, and yet into what cracks do these impulses flow in a world without religion? At the very end, he confesses something to the reader. He says, here's my secret. I tell it to you with the openness of heart that I doubt I shall ever achieve again. My secret is that I need God, that I am sick and can no longer make it alone. I need God to help me give because I can no longer seem to be able to give, to help me be kind as I no longer seem capable of kindness, to help me love as I seem beyond being able to love. We have a world full of people just like this who need God. We need God, each one of us. We need God to be able to love, to be kind, to see, to understand, to know, to love one another, to love God himself. We need God. Do we need God? Yes. We absolutely need God. And we need God, we need his light to penetrate the darkness of our hopelessness and our despair and our disbelief. And when he does, in all the mess that obscures our vision could be wiped away, and we could see his face as if for the very first time. Father, we are grateful. Grateful for your miracles. We are grateful for your truth. We are grateful for your Son. Lord, open our eyes. Help us to see. Help us to understand. Help us to recognize your truth and your goodness in a world that seeks its own ends and its own illumination. Lord, amidst all of our festivities, all of our lesser hopes, help us cling to your true absolute hope, to your truth that gives us genuine freedom, and to your absolute claim that Jesus Christ is the only way to God. Lord, guide us this week as we become your ambassadors and lift our eyes that we can see your truth anew each and every day. We ask all these things in your Son's name and by your Spirit's power. Amen.